Number 10. Legion. Jesus encounters a possessed man and calls on the demon to emerge, demanding to know its name, which is an important element of traditional exorcism practice. He finds the man is possessed by a multitude of demons who give the collective name of Legion. So yeah, this demon is made of countless evil spirits able to incarnate into a physical body or separate into their respective forms at will. While the types of demons that make up Legion is unknown, they are said to be the same kind of demon that would inhabit a host and would have a single hive mind. Speaking of which, the demons of Legion do act like a hive mind, always speaking in unison and always knowing what the other demon is thinking and preparing to do. Legion appears as a floating sphere that is protected by an outer shell composed of massive innumerable humanoid bodies. This enormous lump of flesh conceals an inner core whose identity can vary. Legion, when possessing a human body, begins to torture the psychological person, making them have depressive and negative thoughts to erase any desire of life from its hosts. Their attitude of possessing human bodies is seen as a horrible act to most angels, as it deprives humans of their only weapon, free will. Number 9. Furfur. Furfur, also known as Furcifer, is a demon who is said to be the Count of Hell, leading 26 legions. He speaks in a hoarse voice, has a fiery tail, and usually appears as a stag. He is said to be able to make men and women fall in love, and also has command over great storms. He gives true answers to all things past, present, and future, but he must first be commanded to enter a magic triangle, for if not, he will lie and deceive the conjurer. But if he enters the triangle, he will answer truly and gladly speak about divinity, the creation of the world, himself, and other fallen angels. He can also destroy all the conjurer's enemies by burning them up, and if the magician requests it, he will not suffer temptations from any spirit or in any form. Furfur can also supposedly be called upon when a mortal wishes to take vengeance on other demons. This is likely included in his capability to destroy the conjurer's enemies. And I just gotta say, how scary can a demon be if its name is literally Furfur? It sounds like a name someone would give their cat. Number 8. Beelzebub. Beelzebub is a former Seraphian turned into high-ranking demon who is considered one of the 7 princes of hell and oversees the Order of the Fly. In Catholic demonology, he is sometimes considered to be one of the first 3 angels to fall from heaven, along with Lucifer and Leviathan. He is also often confused with Satan, and the 2 names can be interchanged. However, strictly speaking, they are 2 separate entities. Beelzebub is the chief lieutenant of Lucifer and is one of the most loyal. He is commonly described as placed high in the hierarchy of hell and is seen as being associated with envy. He is also the prince of false gods, and flies play a large focus in imagery detailing him. The malignant spirit can even take the form of flies, according to some. I mean, ever heard of Lord of the Flies? Yup, that's him. Number 7. Mammon. Mammon in the New Testament of the Bible is commonly thought to mean money, material wealth, or an entity that promises wealth and is associated with the greedy pursuit of gain. After the rebellion in heaven, Mammon was banished to hell, where he is the one who finds underground precious metals that his demonic companions used to build their capital city, Pandemonium, by Lucifer's order. Mammon counsels the devils to be happy with what they've got and to create a home for themselves in hell. He is one of the 7 princes of hell, each representing the 7 deadly sins. Mammon represents greed and is known as the treasurer of hell, and was said to have had dealings with the Greek deity Zeus. It is thought that when you make a deal with the devil for wealth and fame, you are making it with Mammon. Number 6. Belphegor. Belphegor is a demon lord that resides over the sin of sloth and is one of the 7 princes that rules hell. He also assists people to make discoveries. For example, he seduces people by suggesting to them ingenious inventions that will make them rich, and they wouldn't have to work hard for it. As one of the fallen angels, Belphegor was originally a member of the Order of the Principalities, and after his fall, he became a demonic counterpart to one of the 10 Sephiroth that oversee the Tree of Life. He is the biblical enemy of the 6 Sephiroth, the patron angel of beauty. It's said that if Belphegor were to become too influential in the world, then the beauty of it all would become tainted, causing ruination. Number 5. Leviathan. Leviathan became a demon of darkness and chaos and a leader of hell mentioned in the book of Enoch. Leviathan is one of Lucifer's arms and one of the many faces of the devil in Christianity. He is also the representation of the sin envy. Leviathan is a tamer of beasts, a beast collector, and an excellent strategist. He has the power to summon hellish whales that are natural inhabitants of hell and use them in battle. Leviathan appears as a huge sea beast, a very powerful species of a sea serpent dragon. This form is so colossal that it's said to be capable of frightening the bravest of men and is capable of swallowing fishing boats and even ships. Its scales are several small teeth throughout its body, similar to a shark's body. Now in his human form, Leviathan appears as a handsome young man in his late teens. Although the appearance is similar to a human, he has fish gills on his neck and his ears are pointed. He also has a small shark-like teeth that are hidden under a thin layer of skin in his mouth. Like his name suggests, he is a very jealous person, with Lucifer often being the target though. It should be noted that Leviathan's jealousy isn't limited to only him, so you should watch out. Number 4. Lucifer. Lucifer was one of the most beautiful and indescribable beings created by God, with his wisdom and beauty being described as perfect. However, despite being considered a perfect, beautiful, and glorious being by countless angels, Lucifer was extremely proud and rebelled against his father after refusing to bow down to Adam and Eve. Therefore, Lucifer is known as the first sinner, the devil, and the adversary. Now, Lucifer didn't create any angels, only God had that power, but Lucifer did trick some of them into rebelling against God and becoming his followers, claiming that he was more powerful than God and would take God's place as the ruler of the universe. They believed him, and since then Lucifer has used them to do his will. He's known for the deadly sin of pride, and he used his pride to persuade them. I will ascend to heaven, I will raise my throne above the stars of God, I will make myself like the Most High. Isaiah 14. Lucifer also sends the worst people up to earth to wreak havoc and terrorize everyone, as well as tries to tempt non-sinners to the dark side, so be safe. Number 3. Abaddon. Abaddon is considered the ruler of all demons in the 7th layer of hell, violence, and also the commander of the locusts of Abaddon. Now what are the locusts? Well, they're scorpion-tailed warhorses that have a man's face with lion's teeth. They are commanded to torment anyone for 5 months who does not have the seal of God on their forehead by using their scorpion-like tails. So yeah, he rules them. He has eyes as black as night and a huge mouth with many sharp teeth like those of a great white shark. In addition, he wears black armor and his wings have even turned dark. Abaddon is sometimes referred or foreshadowed as death, as they both are neutral entities of two opposing forces. He is also considered both an angel and demon, with neutral and at times lawful agents of both heaven and hell. It is unknown where his allegiance lies. He's often bringing judgment upon people in the name of God, implying that he works for the Almighty. That being said, Abaddon has also caused events that God would never have wanted to happen, let alone the fact that Abaddon helped Lucifer during the war in heaven. Seems like he liked to play both sides. It's also said during Judgment Day he will gather the souls of the damned and carry them down to the place of God's final judgment. Number 2. Asmodeus. Asmodeus is a demon who personifies and represents lust, the sexual sin related to adultery. He is the demon who exists as the arch-rival of the angel of chastity, Gabriel. Asmodeus is also referred to as one of the 7 princes of hell and represents one of the 7 deadly sins, being lust. Asmodeus is a demon of lust and is therefore responsible for twisting people's sexual desires. It is said that people who fall to Asmodeus' ways will be sentenced to an eternity in the 2nd level of hell. He is also a demon of lechery, jealousy, anger, and revenge. In hell, Asmodeus looks human, however he has stark black eyes and 2 rows of shark teeth sticking out of his mouth. In this form, Asmodeus has no hair on his head, but has a muscular appearance from the waist up and 2 bat wings protruding from his back. From the waist down, he has what looks like kangaroo legs and a long dragon's tail. His horrible appearance is capable of causing fear and repudiation in humans who fall into hell, and that's the demon's intention. And coming up at number 1 is Satan. Satan is a prominent demon in the hierarchy of hell. He is known for bringing evil and temptation and is known as the deceiver who leads humanity astray. Satan is even able to take control of the life of a person in the stead of God, though only to an extent to what God allows. Satan would appear to those who are sinful, playing into their hearts and towing them into despair. He may either be depicted as a rebel to the will of God, or as one who tempts mankind to commit sin to show God that mankind can easily be led astray from him. He is described as the ruler of the demons and the god of this age. In Revelation, Satan appears as a great red dragon who is ultimately banished from heaven by Michael the archangel. Satan is mostly known as the devil, and although the book of Genesis does not mention him, he is often identified with the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Satan is also said to be associated with one of the 7 deadly sins, being wrath, and is one of the 7 princes of hell.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Johann Faust. According to the stories passed down about this man, it is said that he was an alchemist and astrologer who lived in Germany during the early 1500s. It is said that in his plight to become the smartest man in the world, while also enjoying as many earthly pleasures as possible, he summoned the help of a demon named Mephistopheles. There are terrible stories about how cruel and truly evil this man was, and as a professor, it is said he looked down on everyone else. Local priests apparently believed that he had actually made a deal with the devil in which he sold his soul to him, and there are also other stories that say his pet dog was actually a demon who was able to shapeshift. During his life, he did publish several grimoires, and in 1540, while conducting some sort of alchemic experiment, his laboratory exploded. In our number 9 spot today, we have Jonathan Moulton. Jonathan is a man who was born in 1726, and he was known for his military career. He served in King George's War as well as in the French and Indian Wars, but after his service is where the story really starts. Basically, after his time fighting was over, he went on to become one of New England's wealthiest men. This caused heads to swivel and rumors to swirl because this wasn't something that was normally seen. This all gave way for the rumor that Jonathan had struck this luck of fortune because he was actually working with the devil. People began to say that for financial gain, he in turn gave his eternal devotion and even his soul over to the devil. The devil would visit him every month in order to fill up his boot with gold. You know what happens with things like this though, people get greedy. It is said that despite this lavish lifestyle he was already living, he wanted more, and this led him to make the mistake of trying to trick the devil. He cut a hole in the floor above his basement and placed a boot over it, which also had a hole in the heel. Of course, he did this so that when the devil came with the gold, he'd get a whole basement full rather than just the boot. But the devil of course caught on. From there, it is said that the devil burned down Jonathan's house along with all of the gold that lay inside. In our number 8 spot today, we have Niccolo Paganini. If you search people who made a deal with the devil, Niccolo is one of the first names that pops up. Niccolo was a professional violinist who was born in 1782. His parents began to send him to lessons when he was just 5 years old, and by age 15 he was already touring the world because he was so talented. What's really interesting about Niccolo and his story, other than his obvious musical genius however, is the rumors surrounding his talent and subsequent recognition. According to some, people believe that his own mother summoned the devil in order for her son to be the extreme talent that he was. There are many modern diagnoses that could potentially explain some of what made Niccolo so talented, and I mean, we all know quite well that sometimes people are just born with extreme talent, but of course in the early 1800s people and their imaginations certainly ran wild. The final reason why people believe he may have made a deal with the devil is because shortly before his death, he was quite sick. The doctors had a feeling he was nearing death, so they sent in a priest to pray over him. When he first saw the priest, it is said that he freaked out and sent the priest away. Many people believe that him pushing the priest away was only a confirmation of the fact that he was working with the devil. In our number 7 spot today, we have Theophilus of Adana. For this one, we are taking it back a little bit all the way to 538 AD. Theophilus of Adana was a cleric in the Roman Catholic Church. So basically one day he was elected to become the new bishop, but he ended up denying the offer, as it is said he wanted a more priestly sort of position instead of one that came with all of that power and responsibility. It is said that he wanted the position of archdeacon, which would have seen him controlling where the donation money went. So apparently in passing on this bishop position, he thought that if he gave the position to his rival, then his rival should at least be grateful enough to give him the position he wanted, but of course, that did not happen. This new bishop gave away the seat that Theophilus wanted and instead gave him the position of being a humble cleric. This made Theo super angry, and this is when he thought that maybe the church isn't as holy as he once thought they were. This is when he decided to summon the help of Satan. He ended up signing a contract with Satan in his own blood. He denounced Jesus and the Virgin Mary, and it is said that, with the help of Satan, he was once again voted into the bishop position, and this time he accepted. At this point in time, it is said that he felt so guilty he confessed to this deal with the devil, and the priest who he confessed to decided that they should burn the blood-signed contract. For a second, Theo looked up, but then suddenly he collapsed and died. Many people believe that it was because he had broken his contract. In our number 6 spot today we have Giuseppe Tartini. Giuseppe was an Italian violinist and composer who lived during the 1700s. He went on to compose a song called The Devil's Trill Sonata. Called The Devil's Trill Sonata, and not only this, but he claimed to wake up one night to find Satan sitting on the edge of his bed playing the violin. Seems as though the devil really likes violins, apparently. What's extremely curious is after this alleged encounter, it is said that Giuseppe's violin skills hit heights never seen before. He was able to suddenly play extremely complicated trills that are impossible for most musicians. Apparently even today the sonata is too difficult for most musicians to play, which is why people believe that perhaps this story really was true. In our number 5 spot today we have Urbain Grandier. Born in 1590, Urbain was a French Catholic priest who was known as being a little promiscuous with some of the nuns. Look, there's no judgment from me at all, but I'm just saying, the Catholic Church now doesn't like that. I can't imagine pre-1600s Catholic Church just being cool with that, but anyway, it is said that he actually took quite a public stance against the church's view on celibacy. Because of his escapades, there were points where people who had indulged with him were now accusing him of witchcraft and using dark magic in order to tempt them. This led to a trial which did end in acquittal, but France's chief minister did not like Urbain at all. The priest had apparently published some less than kind criticism about him, so naturally he returned the favor and ordered a second trial. This time Urbain was put through some grueling interrogations, and while it certainly was inhumane, it led to the discovery of quite a document. One that was apparently found in his belongings. It was a contract that is said to have been written in Latin and covered with strange symbols. The contract was signed by Urbain as well as several demons, including the devil himself. Basically, the contract promised him the love of women, the respect of monarchs, that sort of thing, in exchange for his allegiance to the devil. In the end, this led to Urbain being found guilty of making a deal with the devil, and he was sentenced to death. In our number 4 spot today we have Aleister Crowley. This man is quite well known for being the leader of an occult group, and this really does stem back even into his childhood. It is said that quite early on, Aleister started calling himself the Beast and the Antichrist, and he is even quoted as saying that God and Satan fought over his soul. In one of his books he wrote, quote, "I was in the death struggle with self. God and Satan fought for my soul those 3 long hours. God conquered. Now I have only one doubt left. Which of the twain was God?" Many people believe that perhaps he made a deal with Satan, but it is possible that these are just rumblings based on Aleister's teachings and beliefs. In our number 3 spot today we have Jack Parsons. Jack was a man who was born just a few years prior to the Wright brothers flying the first airplane, and being born at a time like this had him growing up dreaming of and reading sci-fi novels about rocket ships taking people to space. It is said that this love of rocket ships and these dreams of going to space are what led him to summoning the devil in order to make a deal. Jack wanted to sell his soul in exchange for a rocket ship. This deal didn't end up working, but Jack continued to study science as he grew older. Later in life he stumbled upon the teachings of Aleister Crowley that we just talked about, and this is when he tried his hand at summoning things again. This time he tried to summon a goddess named Babylon that was said to possibly help men get to the moon one day. Technically, in some ways, it worked, because Jack Parsons ended up helping create the jet fuel that is said to still be used today. Maybe it was his original deal with the devil, maybe it was the goddess, or maybe it was just good old passion and drive that did it. I guess that all depends on what you believe. In our number 2 spot today we have Christoph Hasemann. Back in 1677, Christoph was an artist who was working on a castle in Austria. He was so talented at his job that he had been commissioned by the nobles to do this work. There were rumblings about how he may have sold his soul to the devil, but no one was sure of it until it is said that Christoph confessed. He said he had 9 years prior and that he regretted it very much now and actually wanted an exorcism. They demanded to know if he was a practicing witch, but in the end it was decided that he was not, and that instead the devil just had a really strong hold on him. The local priest began giving Christoph exorcisms, and during these sessions Christoph explained that he had these intense visions where he was coming face to face with the devil, who was in the form of a dragon. The dragon was holding the contract that held Christoph's soul, and this is when he was able to rip it out of the dragon's talons. When he woke up, it seemed as though he was cured. After this, he began painting pictures of the devil, and he even painted a story with multiple panels that told the story of how he sold his soul and how they helped him get it back. In our number 1 spot today we have Antoine Rose. This woman from the 15th century is often credited with our modern day image of a witch riding on a broomstick. She became known as the Witch of Savoy, and she is said to have confessed to regularly meeting with the devil. I mean, let's be honest, history doesn't exactly have a good record with those accused of witchcraft, so it isn't quite clear if this deal with the devil was real, or if perhaps Antoine could just add 1 + 1 and then suddenly she was accused of being a witch and had to find a way to try and defend herself. Legend goes that she was in a position where she was in dire need of money, and when she asked her neighbor for help, they led her to a group of people who convinced her to ask the devil for help. When the devil appeared, he agreed to help her, of course in exchange for her rejection of God and her promise to worship him. Story has it that she said the devil had a low, raspy voice when he appeared to her in human form, and she also apparently said that she was quite afraid of him, which, I don't know, personally makes a lot of sense.
Number 10. The Violinist. It's been long said that successful artists have made a deal with the devil, and this has been going on for hundreds of years. An Italian violinist named Giuseppe Tartini claimed the devil appeared to him in a dream and played for him the most incredible piece of music he had ever heard. Here is how he described the experience. "One night in the year 1713, I dreamed I had made a pact with the devil for my soul. Everything went as I wished. My new servant anticipated my every desire. Among other things, I gave him my violin to see if he could play. How great was my astonishment on hearing a sonata so wonderful and so beautiful, played with such great art and intelligence as I had ever even conceived in my boldest flights of fantasy. Upon waking, Giuseppe tried to recreate it, and that became his magnum opus, known as the Devil's Trill Sonata." Number 9. Exorcism gone wrong. In 1997, Father Gabriel Amorth conducted his exorcisms in Rome, and he asked for the help of Jesus, and the young man he was dealing with began to curse and spit, and started using English instead of his native Italian. Screaming and howling, the demon burst forth and looked straight at him, drooling saliva from the young man's mouth. Father Gabriel said he returned fire with prayers and other ritual recitations, demanding that the demon reveal its name. He said, "Unclean spirit, whoever you are and all your companions who possess this servant of God, I command you, tell me your name, the day and the hour of your damnation." The man fixed him with a glare, snarled, and said, "I am Lucifer." Father Gabriel was shocked. He did not expect to receive such a terrifying response. The father mostly used prayers as his weapon, reciting verses of liberation from the Roman rite of exorcism. As Father Gabriel continually commanded the demon to leave the host, it eventually left, but my goodness, that sounds absolutely terrifying. Number 8. Witch trials. Sarah Good was one of the first 3 women to be accused of witchcraft in the Salem witch trials, which occurred in 1692 in Massachusetts. On March 25th, 1692, Sarah was tried for witchcraft, and when she was brought in, the accusers immediately began to rock back and forth and moan, seemingly in response to Sarah's presence. Later in the trial, one of the accusers fell into a fit. Now, Sarah denied the allegations against her, but another woman on trial admitted to being the devil servant. She stated that a tall man dressed in all black came to them, demanding they sign their names in a great book. Although initially refusing, she eventually wrote her name after Sarah, and another woman forced her to. When Sarah was allowed the chance to defend herself in front of the 12 jurors in the Salem Village Meeting House, she argued her innocence, proclaiming that the other two were the real witches. In the end, however, Sarah was convicted of witchcraft and sentenced to death. So did she really meet the devil, or was she innocent? Who knows? Number 7. Strayed from the path. This is the testimony of Jennifer Perez, who was brought up in a Christian home. She strayed from that path, got into drugs, died, and was sent to hell. Fortunately, she was given a second chance, but this is her story. She was in the hospital and her spirit woke up, but her body didn't. As a spirit, 2 men dressed in red approached her and told her to come with them. She went to heaven and saw the Lord and 2 angels, Gabriel and Michael. She and Gabriel went through a black door and it was dark and they were falling. The farther they fell, the hotter it was, and she said it smelled like sulfur. They got to the bottom and she realized that she was in hell, seeing people being tortured by various demons. The cries and torture scared her, and then she saw a massive red creature in the middle of it all, just watching everything. She assumed that this was the devil, and it terrified her. After this, she then ascended back to heaven and was asked for a second chance. She then woke up in the hospital, alive, and devoted the rest of her life to God. Number 6. Mom met the devil. A user on Reddit posted this story about the time their mother met the devil. They said, "My mom told me a story of when she met the devil. She was in high school, she had a friend who was dating an older man. He was probably 20 to 30 years older than her, and he gave her a necklace. Not wanting to get caught by her parents, she gave the necklace to my mom. She wore it, and that night when my mom slept, she dreamt of a man. Clean cut and handsome, but disturbingly evil. She said all she knew about the man was that he was pure evil. He came up to her face, eyes locked on her, stone cold and expressionless, reached for her neck and grabbed the necklace from her neck and twirled it in a circle in the air like a witch's pendant. She jolted awake and couldn't feel the necklace, and in a panic she looked all around for the necklace and found it under her pillow in a perfect spiral." Number 5. TikTok doctor. Once, a man who was pronounced dead by his doctor after being injured said that rather than seeing a bright light and the feeling of coming home, he instead saw hell itself and met the devil. A doctor took to TikTok to explain that he encountered a young man in his early 20s who had been stabbed in the heart after being involved in a deal that went wrong. Not willing to let the man die, medical staff took the victim into surgery, kept him from losing too much blood, and treated the wound in his heart. The doctor remembers the man waking up 4 hours later and crying, claiming that he went straight down to hell and looked straight in the eyes of the devil. The man said he could see the doctors working to save his life, and having never prayed before, gave it a try, at which point an angel pulled him back up out of hell. Remembering how clear the man had been, the doctor said it was the most amazing experience because he was legit. I mean, nobody makes up an experience like that. The last I heard, he's completely changed his life, he gave his life to God, and I still to this day, the look in his eyes when he woke up, the terror, I'm absolutely convinced he did meet the devil. Number 4. Working for the devil. Gilles de Rais was originally hailed a hero of France for his role in the 100 Years' War, a time during which he served as a comrade in arms to Joan of Arc, but the nobleman Gilles de Rais lived a secret, gruesome second life where he enjoyed ending the lives of people who couldn't defend themselves. In September 1440, de Rais was arrested after an almost decade-long spree in which he may have ended the lives of over 140 victims. During his trial, both de Rais and several of his servants/accomplices confessed to their evil deeds. Besides ending people's lives, he also admitted to engaging in Satanism by reportedly summoning the devil and his demonic minions. While the nobleman refused to sell his soul, he offered the blood and organs of his victims in exchange for knowledge and power over the dark arts. Number 3. God wanted her to see hell. Josefa Menendez was a young Spanish sister who had a short religious life of great suffering and experienced many revelations throughout her life. More than once she was taken to hell to witness and feel the suffering firsthand. Sister Josefa was reluctant to write on the subject of hell, and did so only to conform to her lord's wishes. She wrote about her experiences in her journal, and she described it as the greatest torment of hell, namely the soul's inability to love. She wrote, "One of these damned souls cried out, 'This is my torture, that I want to love and cannot. There is nothing left me but hatred and despair. If one of us could so much as make a single act of love, but we cannot, we live on hatred." As mentioned, she went to hell multiple times, but one time she saw the devil. She wrote, "Souls were crying out and the devil answered, 'Insinuate yourselves by including carelessness in them, but keep in the background so that you are not found out. Tempt these others into ambition, into self-interest, to acquiring wealth without working, whether it be lawful or not." That entry was from February 3rd, 1923. She visited hell many times after that, but didn't report on seeing the devil again. And that sounds absolutely terrifying. Number 2. In a coma. Will Carroll is a drummer who has been in the band Death Angel since 2009 and has provided the drum tracks for their last 4 studio albums. After spending nearly 2 weeks in a coma fighting COVID-19, Will revealed that during his battle with the virus, he saw the afterlife, where he would be sent to hell and meet Satan. The illness left him in a critical state where he was put on a ventilator while lying unconscious in a California Pacific Medical Center hospital bed for 12 days before recovering. He said that the devil would punish him for the deadly sin of sloth. The musician said Satan would transform him into a creature similar to that of Star Wars' Jabba the Hutt, and that he would vomit blood until he ultimately had a heart attack. Will told the San Francisco Chronicle that what he went through allowed him to change some of his typical lifestyle habits, including his once heavy alcohol and illegal substance use. "I'm also going to listen to satanic metal though," he joked, but he later admitted that after beating COVID-19, he doesn't think Satan's quite as cool as he used to. And coming up at number 1, The Devil Made Me Do It. Sound familiar? It's because the third Conjuring movie has the same title. This film is inspired by the real events that took place with Arnie Johnson. Ed and Lorraine Warren were helping exorcise a possessed boy named David Glatzel in the early 80s. David's family had seen him being beaten and choked by invisible hands, and that red marks had appeared on his neck afterwards. David had started to growl, hiss, speak in otherworldly voices, and recite passages from the Bible as well. They did many exorcisms on David, and Lorraine said that David levitated, ceased breathing for a time, and even demonstrated the supernatural ability of precognition. During his exorcisms, there was also a rocking chair in the room that would allegedly rock on its own, levitate, and even vanish and reappear. David and Lorraine also claimed to have seen the devil sitting in it. Arnie then coerced one of the demons to possess him while participating in one of David's exorcisms. Afterwards, Arnie's personality changed. He would fall into a trance-like state where he would growl and hallucinate, but later have no memory of it. Then one day, his and his girlfriend Debbie's landlord was drunk and misbehaving, so Ernie ended his life. The day after the incident, Lorraine Warren informed the Brookfield police that Ernie was possessed when the crime was committed. The case then went on to trial, where Ernie's defense was demonic possession and the devil made me do it. The jury deliberated for 15 hours over 3 days before convicting Ernie of first-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison, though he only served 5.
Number 10. Will Carroll. Will Carroll, the drummer of the band Death Angel, caught COVID-19 at the end of his band's European tour. It was a long, hard battle, and thankfully, Carroll was able to come back from it, but the battle along the way may have included an encounter with Satan himself. The virus put him in a critical state, which involved Carroll lying unconscious in his hospital bed for 12 days straight. In an interview with San Francisco Chronicle though, Will revealed that those 12 days were spent in a peaceful dream state. In his dreams, or I would call them nightmares, the devil would punish him repeatedly for the sin of sloth. The devil would apparently turn him into a bulbous-like creature and make him puke blood until his heart gave out. These were the dreams he was having over and over again. Since recovering from the disease, needless to say, Carroll has changed his lifestyle habits. For more reason than this one, it appears recovering from this awful virus we all hate definitely felt like returning from hell. Maybe the virus is from there too, wouldn't be surprised. to be honest. Number 9. Giuseppe Tartini. Everybody wants to be the best at something, but for Tartini, the best just wasn't good enough. Tartini was born on April 8th, 1692, and the guy might as well have been born with a violin in his hand. He was brilliant, a brilliant musician and composer, and he thought so too, until one day he heard someone playing the instrument he dedicated his life to with a kind of expertise that he had never heard. This sent him spiraling, and for 12 days, Tartini locked himself away, practicing all hours of the day. While he drove himself mad, the devil decided to pay a visit to a desperate soul in a dream. He offered to make Tartini the most masterful violinist in the world in exchange for his soul. Like the wise guy he was, he asked for a demonstration, so the devil picked up the instrument and played a sonata with ease and beauty like nothing he'd ever heard before. When Giuseppe awoke, he scrambled to write down the sonata, which has become easily one of his most popular pieces of work. Its name? The Devil's Trill, and I listened to it and it is beautiful. For his entire career though, Tartini remained frustrated with the piece, as he was never able to play it exactly as he had heard it. This story is a reminder to never make a deal with the devil, as you never really get what you asked for. Number 8. Rose la Tulipe. It appears that the devil and the violin kind of go hand in hand. The story of Rose la Tulipe is a famous French-Canadian story and one of my absolute favorites. The woman who shared this story with me swears it was true, and I can't help but believe it either. Rose begged her father to host a dance on the eve of Lent, and he agreed, but with one condition, that at midnight the dancing had to stop. Dancing wasn't allowed during Lent, so if they continued, they would be sinning. Rose agreed, and everyone came to join on the night, and Rose danced with anyone who would, even with other men, though she was engaged. Then at 11 p.m. a knock came at the door, and the priest opened it to reveal a dazzlingly handsome stranger, and Rose fell hard. The priest welcomed him and requested that he take off his hat, shoes, and jacket, all of which the man refused, saying he wasn't staying long. He immediately swept Rose in a dance and asked no one else for the remainder of the evening. As soon as midnight hit, the dancing stopped, but the man whispered in her ear, "Just one last dance, my Rose." With struggles she resisted, but suddenly her feet, bewitched it seemed, began dancing without her. The man then kissed her, and the spark from their kiss set the house ablaze. The next morning Rose was found mumbling around the ashes, now mysteriously an old woman, the devil having taken part of her soul with him. I know, that sounds like a legend, but like, thanks for indulging me because I really love that story and I want an opportunity to tell it, so here it is. Other versions say that she actually got taken back to hell with him, and another is that her mother came and saved her. A whole bunch of stuff, but I think that one's my favorite. Okay, number 7. Richard Cable. Richard Cable might as well have been the devil himself. A squire at Brooke Manor in Devon, England in the 1600s, he was known as a monstrously cruel man. He abused his wife, and one night she escaped him with him hot on her heels. He killed her and her faithful dog, but little did the man know that that dog would haunt him for the rest of his days, and there would be many. At least that's what Cable thought. Cable had made a deal with the devil to live forever, but mysteriously Cable passed away in 1677. But it appears the devil did give him everlasting life, as a spirit walking the moors at night, forever being chased by a herd of hounds. The locals even put iron bars around his tomb because there were so many sightings of him wandering around the moors. Instead, now, a red glow occasionally emits from his resting place, and the howls of demons are said to gather, waiting to claim his soul for their master. Number 6. Saint Dunstan. Saint Dunstan was a saint who lived in 900s, and for some reason the devil loved to visit him. He was a talented metalsmith, and one day an old man requested that he make a chalice for him. Dunstan agreed, but when he looked back up at the old man, he had shifted into a woman, and then very suddenly a boy. Immediately he knew it was the devil, but fearing his wrath, concealed his distress and crafted the chalice. Subtly though, he put his blacksmith tongs in the fire, and quick as he could he thrust the tongs onto Satan's nose and cast him from the cell. That wouldn't be the last time he saw the devil though. Dunstan would face him once again and attack the devil by hammering into his hoof, and only agreed to remove it if the devil agreed never to cross a threshold where a horseshoe hung. And that's why today horseshoes are considered good luck, so take a lesson from that. Number 5. A boy named Scott.
not. An article written by Richard J. Bonifant recounts several near-death experiences in order to try and see similarities. Some usually describe a light or a tunnel, but after a little boy named Scott got into an accident, he may have met something much darker. On June 10th, 1995, Scott and his family were enjoying getting ice cream from the ice cream truck, as you do, but Scott was so excited he ran out from behind the truck and he got hit by another motorist. He was almost declared dead, but 8 hours later, thankfully, he awoke in intensive care. The weirdest part was that he described in perfect detail what had happened to him as if he was watching from across the street. He knew every single detail. It was really freaky. Even recalled trying to give his dad a hug, but passing right through him. The scariest thing though was who he ended up meeting. He suddenly faced a dark vortex and felt himself being drawn into it by the haunting, putrid image of the devil. Scott said he looked like a man made of rotting flesh, and he tried to grab Scott, but he was whisked away into a tunnel of light, so it was kind of like the devil's trying to steal him from God. I'm glad things ended well for the little boy, getting to be with his family again, but still, not something anyone wants to see in the afterlife. Number 4, Dr. Paul Thigpen.
All of a sudden I felt as if the darkness had filled my whole body and that there was maybe a little part of it that was still me.
That was a clip of an interview with Dr. Paul Thigpen, who despite being raised under a Christian household became an atheist before he was even 12 years old. That is until one day he was hanging with his friends when he was around 17 by the water in the front seat of a car. All three of them were squished in, and a palpable darkness began pressing into the top of his head, all the way to the bottom of his toes. He said it took over the majority of his body, and though he'd become an atheist, he didn't drink or do drugs, so we know this isn't a psychedelic experience, but his body suddenly felt like a kind of superhuman strength taking over him. A voice in his head whispered, "I'm throwing you into the water." To this day, Dr. Paul can't swim, and his body started moving across his friend's seat to leave the car. He knew he was going to die. Then he heard another voice that said focus on the cross. He suddenly remembered the cross his girlfriend gave him, so he grabbed it, and meanwhile his friends were like freaking out. After holding the cross for a while, he said the darkness subsided, and when he told his friend what had happened, he said, "That's strange. The same thing happened to my girlfriend." He sought counsel from another friend who without a doubt said that he had been visited by the devil. Later he discovered that his girlfriend's friend was a witch, and that kind of pointed all the arrows in that direction, so who knows. Was it a demon or in fact the devil? Either way, something changed his mind. Watch the rest of the interview and decide for yourself. Number 3, the man with the glowing eyes. Reddit user Dabby_U_69 had an experience as a kid that I don't think anyone could be the same after. They grew up in a pagan household, which apparently meant you saw a lot of weird stuff. But one day, on a Tuesday in the afternoon, she was playing with the daughter of a family friend who they called Jay, just outside as you do. So they're just playing, and then all of a sudden Jay just stops dead in her tracks and points behind her. She froze and then turned around slowly to see, and I quote, a tall shadow man about 6-7 feet tall in a trench coat and hat. The scariest thing about him was his eyes. Oh god, his eyes. Huge, red, and glowing circles, but its actual eyes were small, bloodshot, and his pupils were tiny. The man reportedly tried to strangle them, but they bolted too quick for the house. Once they told their moms, they in turn freaked out because apparently at the same time the man appeared, the TV had turned long static. They brought in a psychic who said, "My love, the devil is here and he wants to hurt you. He was sent by someone, but we don't know who." The woman then gave a crystal bottle filled with sage and lavender along with something else to ward him off, and apparently the bottle is running out. So I hope she's okay. Number 2, Father Gabriel Amorth. Father Gabriel Amorth was the official exorcist for the Diocese of Rome and claimed to have performed 60,000 exorcisms before he died in 2016. But one day in 1997 he encountered a spirit he never thought he'd see. A slim young peasant man was escorted to a small room where Father Amorth waited him. Immediately he knew something was wrong. He requested the help of Jesus, and as soon as he did, the man began to spit and curse in English, which wasn't a language the man was known to speak. But then the man was seething with anger and drool dripped from his mouth as he stared down the father. He tried to attack him, but the exorcist held him back with prayers, demanding the demon reveal its name. He called out, "Unclean spirit, whoever you are and all your companions who possess this servant of God, I command you, tell me your name, the day and the hour of your damnation." The man snarled, and what came out next paralyzed him. Dripping evil, the man said, "I am Lucifer." He continued fighting the devil with prayer, and the windows formed ice crystals as he did so. The man also bent backwards for 25 minutes, howling at him, then began hovering at 3 feet in the air. Was it him? We don't know! We just don't know, but it certainly sounds like it. Number 1, last but not least, we kind of have to talk about this because I think a bunch of people saw the devil here. Castle Huska is one of the creepiest places in the world, as it was specifically built to keep the devil inside. Legend says that the castle was built over a gateway to hell. From afar, it looks like a typical old castle until you get closer. The castle wasn't built to be lived in, as evident by the fake windows and doors. Though there is a way inside, people don't recommend you step foot in there. In 878 AD, winged beasts and half-human creatures spilled from the gateway and terrorized the people in the village. Somehow they held them off long enough to build the place, but they were still curious. When construction first began, prisoners in the village would be offered a pardon if they agreed to be lowered by rope into the hole. The first man to attempt it is said to have met the devil himself while he was down there. He was tied up and slowly lowered. After a few moments in the darkness, the man began screaming and begged to be pulled up. By the time they hauled him up, he looked as though he aged 30 years. His hair was white, his skin creased and speckled. They tried to discover what he had seen, but the man was incoherent and was later put into an insane asylum before dying 2 days later.
Starting at number 10, the door to hell in Turkmenistan. In Turkmenistan, the Karakum Desert, there is a crater that just won't stop burning. It is now known as the Door to Hell, and it's a 230 foot wide crater that was formed about 50 years ago when Soviet scientists were searching for oil. Basically, back in 1971, their drilling platform collapsed and it formed a crater, and then it turns out they accidentally hit a methane reserve, and so that was sending the dangerous gas into the air, so they set the crater on fire to burn the methane. And then that original burning has remained ever since, so now it just looks like this giant burning crater in the ground, and yeah, it looks like an entrance to hell. Like, you can just picture that happen, and then the devil's just clapping, being like, it just looks like a doorway. Burning. But on to number 9, Route 666. Now, the name of this road has been changed since, you know, the name, and it's been changed to Route 491 because of those issues. Because, yeah, there's issues associated with having the number 666 in the route. And so the so-called Devil's Highway, as, you know, some have called it, it was named because it was the 6th spur off Route 66, and so as time progressed on and accidents happened on the road, both fatal and non-fatal, people began to blame the road's name and not other factors in these accidents. And so it's said that the Najavo people of the area believe that legends like skinwalkers live around the barren stretches of the road and they step into oncoming traffic. But skinwalkers aren't the only thing rumored to be around there. There are strange disappearances, rumors of hellhounds that keep pace with vehicles no matter how fast they go, and even a haunted semi-truck associated. Like, the semi-truck would appear in front of the cars and try to run them off the road going in the opposite direction. And, you know, with the number being it, they say that it's the devil being associated with it that brings the devil and these deeds closer, you know, to the surface, and that led to the name change to Route 491. On to number 8, Devil's Hole in Death Valley. This fissure, called the Devil's Hole, is located just over the Funeral Mountains from Death Valley. And so devil, funeral, death. You already have 3 reasons to just avoid this area. Now, the Devil's Hole is a gateway to a system of flooded caverns that is just not entirely mapped out underground. And so yeah, it's not been fully explored, but that's not to say people haven't tried exploring it. So a few people have died trying to explore it because it's said to be, well, starting like this, it kind of funnels out and there's little pockets of air so people can get lost pretty easily. And so, as unique as this place is, it did catch the attention of a convicted cult leader by the name of Charles Manson. I don't know if you've heard. He believed that the waters that flooded the underground caverns were blocking a doorway to some sort of underground kingdom that would provide water and shelter for his group. And while that's never been confirmed as a possibility, the Devil's Hole is home to something in that sense. It's home to the endangered pupfish, aka the Death Valley pupfish. It's kind of cute on an unrelated note. To number 7, Diana's Punch Bowl. And so the name Diana's Punch Bowl seems, you know, pretty chill, but it's also known as the Devil's Cauldron. And so it gets that name because it's a giant boiling hot spring in Nevada. Well, it's hard to get there because it's only accessible by a 35-mile gravel road that can sometimes be kind of muddy. When you get there, it's kind of like awestruck and like,
cool. Basically, it's a cup-shaped depression in the ground about like 600 feet across, and it has a steaming, bright blue pond of hot water. And so I'm guessing the devil in this name comes from just how hot the hot water in the hot spring is. Hot, hot, hot. A usual hot tub ranges from about 100 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's just like a nice temperature to, you know, bathe in or whatever. But this pool of hot water and its temperature ranges between 140 and 180 degrees Fahrenheit. So if a traveler ever decided to, you know, take a little bit of a dip, they would get burned, because this is nearly boiling water. That's, you know, Devil's Cauldron. I wasn't able to find why it's called Diana's Punch Bowl, but maybe Diana makes a really good punch, or she makes a really bad punch, and that's why they wanted to associate it with Diana. But yeah. So this next one is what happens if you mix the name Devil's Cauldron and Diana's Punch Bowl together. At number 6 is the Devil's Punch Bowl. So in Aspen, the Roaring Fork River pours into a natural rock bowl, and the effect is a bubbling cauldron, and it tends to attract the likes of cliff divers. The one thing is, you kind of have to be warned if you're thinking of going cliff diving here, because, you know, whenever the devil is in the name of something, you can tell there should be a warning there, and it's not for no good reason. So quite a few divers have unfortunately met their end in this area because of the pull of the river, and people kind of underestimate it. The most recent instance of this was back in 2014, and the water moves quickly and a person can get caught in the pull and, you know, stuck with their head underwater, and that is what happened in this instance. In this case, in 2014, a man did save his wife from drowning, but only to be pulled back into the river's current. He couldn't get himself to safety before the river took him away, and he ended up drowning before anyone could come to his help. The location of this Devil's Punch Bowl is about 35 miles down the road from any cell service, so it was hard to get any help called, though someone did try. So cliff diving is no joke, and anytime you see devil in the name, be warned. At number 5, Devil's Sinkhole in Texas. According to local lore by a pioneer by the name of Eamon Billings, when he discovered this sinkhole in 1867, he called it the outlet to hell, the Devil's Own Sinkhole, and from there the name kind of stuck. It makes sense. It's a bat-infested sinkhole in Texas, home to 3 million bats, and, you know, bats come across pretty scary. Now, while the lore insinuates that the sinkhole is a mystery created by the devil himself, the science of the hole points to something else: water. Research indicates that groundwater created a cavity below the surface of the ground, and when the water drained, the ceiling of the cavern just left with it. This created the Devil's Sinkhole. And when it comes to spooky things there, 3 people unfortunately have died in the sinkhole because it used to be explored by quite a bit of treasure hunters and artifact seekers before it was closed for the safety of the people and the conservation efforts of the bats that live there. At number 4, the Devil's Kitchen. Now this is touted as the creepiest corner of the New York State, the Devil's Kitchen, and it has more than just hiking, cycling, and ice climbing. It has an abandoned hotel, ghost stories, and unexplained lights on the trail too. But first, let's talk about the name. Why kitchen? I want to know. Now, the devil in the name comes from the unfortunate amount of hiking accidents and deaths, and the kitchen part of the name is a little bit different in its origination. Stories say that people thought the boulders at the bottom of the gorge were the kitchenware of the devil, possibly because there were cauldron-like pools of water at the base of these boulders. But let's talk about what you want to hear. What are these ghostly lights? Well, stories say that some miners passed away in the nearby mine, and the lights are from the ghosts swinging their lanterns from side to side. So when passersby see this, they think it might be someone else, but it's just a mysterious light with no person around. But let's move on to number 3, the Gomantong Caves in Sabah, Malaysia. Now, while the devil isn't in the name of this place, it's known to be a part of the experience. Sure, there's beauty in the limestone walls being over 300 feet tall in some places, but there are many creatures you may not be a fan of that call this place home. So there's crabs, so, you know, not bad. Snakes, which can be cute, but, you know, mixed opinions. And then scorpions, which is just a no from me. But there's even more. There are more than 2 million bats living in the Gomantong Caves, which leave their bat guano all over the ground. And so don't slip, because the hand railings there have just as many bat droppings on them as the floor, and once you fall to the ground you may come face to face with some cockroaches, and there are several million of those roaches scurrying around, and guess what, that's not even my biggest fear about this place. Basically, Satan himself lives within the infamous giant Scutigera centipede. That's a centipede that's at least 3 inches long and is poisonous. And like centipede. It's a no from me, okay? So let's go to number 2, a Google Maps pentagram. In a corner of Kazakhstan, 12 miles away from the closest settlement, is something that shows up as a clear 5-pointed star in a circle. A pentagram can be seen as a symbol of Baphomet, a deity associated with the devil, and people think this might be a mystery associated with the devil, but then others say, no, it's just a park by a lake that happens to be in the form of a star with a circle around it, and there's like nothing creepy about it at all, but I don't know, I'm not totally convinced. So let's go on to number 1, the Blood Falls. Now, Taylor Glacier in Antarctica looks absolutely horrifying. Let your mind wander for a moment, looking at just how gory it looks. Yeah, so very gory, but completely natural. It's a horrifying prank thanks to Satan. So about 5 million years ago, the glacier sealed off a lake with really high rich microbes in it, and without light and oxygen making its way through the water, it just became more and more concentrated. So the salt levels skyrocketed, iron levels through the roof, and then it starts seeping out of this fissure in the glacier, and when it sees the light of day, the salt keeps it from freezing so it remains a liquid, and the iron gives it its bloody hue so it just looks like blood is spurting out of this waterfall. And so with all that science, it still looks absolutely horrifying to me, like a blood waterfall. Like it was used in The Shining, like blood coming out of, you know, an elevator, and so the devil decided like, haha, no, I see what you're doing, but like, what if I did that?
Number 10, Richard Cabell. This man lived in Devon, England during the 1600s and was apparently a huge dirtbag. He would torment people in his town and even abuse his wife. One night, in a violent rage, he struck his wife and she tried to escape. He then hunted her down and killed her and her dog. We all know what happens next. People believe that he felt he had the freedom to treat everyone horribly because he made a deal with the devil for immortality. But he did eventually die on July 5th, 1677. After he died, there were reports of a ghostly figure walking around the gravesite. This freaked out the locals so much, so they put a giant slab of stone on top of his grave, as well as encased the tomb with metal bars. And it was said that at night you could see a ghostly figure that kind of looked like a beast with glowing red eyes. Some people thought that it was Satan looking for the soul that belonged to him. Number 9, the carpenter. The devil's weaved into history in so many different places. This ancient tale comes from a village called Tyrol in Austria. The legend has it that the locals had a well-traveled bridge that they used to cross from their village to a village called Schruns. One day, the bridge was destroyed in a massive flood. The villagers were very distressed, so they got help from a local carpenter. They told him that if he could rebuild the bridge in 3 days, they would pay him a huge amount of money. He knew such a task would be impossible, so he asked the villagers if he could have a day to think about it in order to come up with a solution. That night, when he was trying to find a way to build the bridge in such a short period of time, he was visited by a man with a little green hat. I love how these stories just have some creepy dude that shows up to your house in the middle of the night, and you're like, I wonder what he wants. It can't be anything bad. Well, the little man told the carpenter that he would build the bridge for him, and he could keep all the money. The only thing he wanted in return was the soul from the first person to leave this house and cross the bridge. The carpenter knew this was the devil, so he had a plan. The next day, the bridge was built and the carpenter showed up. The devil saw him there and was jumping in excitement to get his prize. Then the carpenter pushed a goat onto the bridge and said, "Here's your soul." You got played, dude. Legend says the devil took the goat and people started roasting him as he was walking around with the goat. People were like, "Hey, you should have read the fine print. Oh, you two look like a great couple." I just love the idea of people roasting the devil. Like, oh, Prince of Darkness can't trick a tradesman. Number 8, George Lukens. Back in the day, if you got sick, you kind of had 2 options. You either got sicker and died, or you could go to a church and get an exorcism. On May 31st, 1788, George Lukens wasn't feeling too hot. He had started having convulsions, and it was reported that he would yell in a voice that didn't sound human. So he went to the doctor, but after trying almost everything, the doctors couldn't cure him of whatever his ailment was. So he had plan B. He went to see Reverend Easterbrook to get his soul washed. The Reverend tried to help George, but it seemed that what was tormenting him was too strong for just him. So he brought in 6 other priests to perform a super exorcism. The 7 of them took their combined power to cleanse George. During the process, he changed through 7 different demonic personalities, one of which claimed to be the devil. After the super exorcism, George was cured. And probably didn't live past 35 because that's how life went back then. Number 7, the Codex Gigas. Would you read a book that might have been written by the devil? I think that one's a hard pass for me. I'll stick to reading the back of cereal boxes. Well, the Codex Gigas is said to have the devil's actual handwriting, and whoever reads it becomes cursed. Why would you read that? I don't know if I believe that the devil's handwriting is in the book, but I wouldn't want to be wrong just for some light reading. The story goes that back in 1523, Ludovico Spoletano wanted to make the best spaghetti ever, so he summoned the devil. Nah, I'm just kidding. He wanted to answer a series of questions he'd been asked. Exam season is very tough. It's documented that the devil possessed him, grabbed a pen, and started writing. Most of the text has never been decoded except for one sentence that says, "I think it smells like updog." Number 6. Through the Window. This one was written by Redditor Gayreka. It's a story his father told him about when his dad was growing up. He said that when his dad and uncle were younger, his uncle was a bit of a rebellious kid. Never listened, would stay up late, draw dicks on everything. His father told him that it was a big problem, that his uncle was constantly challenging authority and would get in fights with his parents all the time. Well, one night, the whole family heard a blood-curdling scream come from his uncle's room. The family rushed in there and his uncle was freaking out. He said there was a man standing outside his window. Their father went to check for someone but couldn't find anything. His uncle describes the man as wearing a long trench coat and having no face except for glowing red eyes. After this, his uncle was as sweet as pie, became a respectful member of society. So was this a devil encounter? Or was this a story a father told his son so he wouldn't act up? That's healthy parenting. Scare him psychologically, but he'll be a good kid. Number 5. Michael Scott.
No, God!
Not the hilarious character from The Office. Michael Scott was a Scottish mathematician born in 1175 and is considered one of the most brilliant men to come out of Scotland. He traveled through Europe and eventually ended up in Italy. While in Italy, his brilliance didn't go unnoticed. He gained the attention of Emperor Frederick II. Frederick brought Michael into his court as the head astrologer. But when you're a super smart guy back then, people get a little suspicious. It's said he could summon demons to do his bidding, and they would go all over the world to bring him delicacies. And that's just where his power started. There's myths of him defeating a coven of witches that he turned into stone. It's even said he changed the course of the river Steeds. But the most famous one is him summoning the devil to build a road to his castle. His father had just built a shiny new castle and it needed a road. I mean, you don't want to be the only castle in the neighborhood without a road. Like, what do people think? So he called the devil and many demons to build a road for him. He could have just hired contractors. He owed the devil his soul and foresaw that the devil would kill him by dropping a rock on his head. So he always wore a metal cap.
Clever girl.
But one day, he took off his metal cap when entering a church, and a rock fell on his head and killed him. They get you when you least expect. Number 4. John Dee. John Dee was born in 1527 on July 13th. He was an Elizabethan mathematician and astrologer, but he also liked to dabble in the occult. He was into some pretty freaky stuff. Even though he was researching black magic behind closed doors, he managed to work his way up as a man of intellect, becoming the royal astrologer for Queen Mary. However, his little secrets caught up with him and he was arrested for heresy in 1555. How do you get caught for something back then? The only way you would find out would be if you told people. Like, how was your weekend? Ah, pretty good, you know, sacrificed a goat to the Dark Lord. Anyways, when he got out, he kept digging into the occult. In 1582, he claimed to contact the spirit world. People weren't a fan of this, so he had to move up north to the Manchester Collegiate Church. You can go visit his office to this day. There's the desk that he worked at with a giant burn mark in it. It's said that it's the devil's footprint. I would be pissed. I work all this time to summon the devil. He shows up and he puts his feet on my furniture. Number 3, Robert Johnson. Become one of the greatest musicians who ever lived and people are going to start rumors about you. Robert Johnson is one of the most talented and influential blues musicians who has ever walked the earth. And a big myth about him is that he sold his soul to the devil to become as great as he did. As the story goes, he was walking down a highway and came across a man that offered him the ability to play the blues like no one has ever done before, but it would cost him his soul. Robert was like, yeah, I'll do that. I mean, what is a soul really? It's like a concept or like whatever. Well, Robert went down in history for his amazing skills and died suspiciously at 27. Number 2, Niccolò Paganini. Said to be the greatest violinist who ever lived. Seemed to be a common theme that back in the day, if you were great at something, they probably thought you sold your soul to the devil. No, it can be that you have like a natural gift and you work super hard, you just made a deal. Well, the same speculation goes for Niccolò. He was an Italian violinist like none other. He was so gifted that he would surpass anyone who ever taught him. He was touring at 15 and probably got hit on a lot. Part of why people probably thought that he had sold his soul to the devil was that he looked so ghoulish. He was tall, skinny, had pale skin, long black hair. He was kind of like a hot Edward Scissorhands. People would even say that they could see the devil hold his violin while he played. I think they were just jealous. Number 1. George Whitefield. Now this one is my favorite for sure. George was a traveling evangelist. He wandered around trying to get people hyped on God. I mean, we've all seen these guys.
Do it, Jesus! A brand new hit! Bam, 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 bam!
In 1740, George was in Ipswich, Massachusetts. He was putting on a banger show. Like, people were going nuts. Apparently, the sermon was so hot and he was bashing the devil so hard that the devil showed up and was like, "You talking?" And George was like, "Yeah, I'm talking." And then he fought the devil. This is like an episode of Maury. George then summoned the holy power to push the devil out, and after that, the devil fell off a cliff and landed on one foot. He's got like a +10 on acrobatics. It's said that the devil's footprint is there to this day. The devil is probably at home like, "Dude, I don't even know you. Why are you talking so much smack?"
Starting us off with number 10 is The Hand. This was from Stephen Wagner, who said his dad told him the story. So back in 1942 in Juarez, Mexico, his dad was around 20 years old and he went to a circus that was visiting town. His younger brother came along and they didn't really go to see the acts, they were more interested in the freak shows. Disappointed after seeing the performers, they were about to leave with 2 girls when they ran into a short, stubby man. The stranger introduced himself as the greatest illusionist in the world. That's quite a hefty title. When asked if he was part of the circus, the man said the owner turned him down because his act was so frightening. The owner said he was Satan himself. Once he had their attention, he invited them back to his trailer in order to show them the act. Once inside, the stranger put a glove on his right hand, started running his left hand over his right while wiggling his fingers. He then started chanting bizarre words, and when he took the glove off, everyone's jaws just dropped. The stranger's hand was completely skeletal. He turned it, let them see the back, it was completely real. His brother went to take a closer look and the man grabbed his head and said he was really about to show them something now, and at this point everybody shat themselves and made a run for it. The stranger came out onto his porch laughing, and on the floor nearby was a bed of long nails pointing up which he jumped onto. Weird flex, but okay. Blood started coming out of his feet, but he was still just laughing it off, and from that day onwards Stephen's father and brother knew they had met Satan. Coming in at number 9 is Father Urban Grandi. Now Father Urban was a Roman Catholic priest that lived in the Loudun part of France. He was under major scrutiny and received a lot of criticism for ignoring his celibacy vow. If anything, he was known for having sexual relations with many women and as someone who had an elevated sense of lustful depravity. By 1632, he was accused of sending the demon Asmodai to enchant a group of Ursuline nuns into committing evil acts and becoming his sex slaves, you know, as priests do. After numerous nuns made accusations of seduction against him, he was arrested, then acquitted, and then re-arrested. During his second arrest, he was tortured by judges, after which they revealed a contract they found in his bedroom, which indicated he had signed a deal with Satan and many other demons. They saw it as evidence of him making a diabolical pact and convicted him of witchcraft and sentenced him to death. He was burnt at the stake. At number 8, we have A Better Life. This one's from Redditor Kodas_Gaming, who said he had a really rough upbringing. His father abandoned his family and his mother was a heroin addict. He used to see her getting beat to a pulp, after which she'd take her frustrations out on him. CPS ended up taking him and his brother away, but a few years later his mum was clean and back with their dad and they regained custody. Sort of happy ending, kind of, but not really. They lived in a small house in central Texas, and according to the user, the house had a terrifying aura. Anytime he was home, he felt like he was being watched, especially in the bathroom, and he would have regular nightmares. And at this point in his life, his mum was working herself to death because their dad was a lazy slob who did nothing. She got so depressed she tried to take her own life, and desperate to help, the user started praying to God every single day. But nothing changed. He realized for something to change, perhaps he could call on the demonic entity that engulfed his house rather than God. He researched satanic rituals for ages and finally found found the one he needed. While his family were out for ice cream one day, he got on his knees, wax coming down the candles he'd lit, and cut his hand and started drawing symbols on the ground in his blood. Obviously while crying the whole time, because who wouldn't cry after doing that? He recited the words and made the deal. And right after he did that, a cold breeze swept through the house and everything went black. But he was pretty much unfazed because he expected something like that to happen, so he went to bed that night and had the worst nightmare ever. He saw himself in the reflection of the mirror in the bathroom with corpse grey skin, bloody tears, and his eyes were crimson as well. There was a noose around his neck and his hair was bloody. During the dream he thought, this can't be me, and then the reflection started laughing, saying, "It is now, you made the deal." He woke up in the bathtub covered in scratches and scars, and it just kept happening and getting worse. 1 month later he started seeing things, hearing things, his nail beds began to recede and bleed, his canines became sharper, and his tongue used to get cut out of nowhere, and he started full on hallucinating and having visions of the past, of native people being slaughtered. And how did that even happen? I don't even know. And what did he get out of all of this? Other than his mum getting a higher paying job, not much at all. So moral of the story, know what you're getting into before you ask the devil for help. Filling our number 7 slot is Joseph Smith. Now Joseph was a Mormon prophet in the early 1800s who claimed he encountered Satan before he saw Christ for the first time. We have both big shots in one story, how about that? The story goes that despite never doing this before, one day he just decided he was going to pray to God out loud. He went into the woods on a sunny day and knelt down and began to pray. I don't know why he went into the woods, he could have just done it in his house, but okay. But as soon as he did, he said he felt he was seized by a power that engulfed him entirely. He said it was so powerful he tried to speak but felt like his tongue was bound. A thick darkness surrounded him and he thought for sure he was going to die. And I mean, fair enough for being realistic. If I felt that, I'd probably think I was gonna die too. He was ready to sink into this despair that was around him, but in one final hope he used all his strength to call on God to get him out of Satan's hold. Then all of a sudden he saw a huge pillar of light over his head which came down on him. As the light rested on him, he saw 2 personages in the air above him and everything was fine again. At least this one had a happy ending, sort of. Now at number 6 is Madame Lalaurie. Delphine Lalaurie has been mentioned many times on this channel, but just a quick recap for you. She was a big Creole socialite in New Orleans. To the public, that is. Inside her house she tortured and killed the majority of her slaves in a way you can't even imagine. In 1834 a house fire took over her mansion, and that's when she got exposed because authorities found bodies upon bodies of bound or mutilated slaves. One's stomach had been cut open and his intestines were wrapped around his neck. A bucket was also found with various organs from various slaves. A bucket. That's how much mass killing the woman was doing, that she needed a bucket for all the organs she was harvesting. Anyway, with some stroke of luck she managed to escape New Orleans and go to France, but many believe she didn't just escape due to luck. She invented a religion involving voodoo and black magic, and on top of that people vehemently believe she made a pact with the devil in order to be able to still be wealthy, still be free, and escape whilst committing these horrendous acts. I mean, for me it was either the devil pact or she paid a lot of important money to let her go. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 5 is the Satanic Cult. This one's from Brad, who said back in 2005, him and his friends spent one summer TPing a lot of houses. In the town they grew up, there were always rumors of a satanic cult that operated around a 10-minute drive away. So one day they decided to go check it out and TP it. Ballsy move, I have to say. The 5 friends went there the day before moon, which I guess is a part of every scary story you hear nowadays, and they bypassed the fence and ended up in a garden enclosure and heard an eerie high-pitched sound. Ignoring it, they continued to explore, found an old locked church, and found nothing else and decided to leave. Bit anticlimactic, but just stay with me. When they got to their car, their key, which was working perfectly 10 minutes prior, just stopped working. The car alarm started going off and then it magically just unlocked by itself. They piled in and drove off, and mid-drive the lights in the car just went off. The driver didn't press anything to cause it, it just happened. Panicked, they rushed home, and when
when Brad got to his front porch, he found 3 identical black cats. Keep in mind he lives a good 25 miles away from the cult, so how did these cats even get to his house? He took the cats as a bad omen and decided to take the cats a few miles out of town and leave them there, and the whole drive he was being followed by 2 black cars despite taking small dirt roads. Now I don't know if people were just messing with him here or the satanic cult was there and they saw him and everything was their doing, but either way, it's scary and it's creepy. At number 4 is Giuseppe Tartini. Now from the name, doesn't he just sound like a brilliant Italian musician of some kind? His name just has the ring to it, you know? Anyway, Tartini was an Italian composer and violinist during the Baroque period. He was very influential in Italy, but he was also known for his huge inferiority complex and uncontrollable temper. And I can just see that equaling to a lot of smashed violins. But anyway, the story goes that one day Tartini heard Francesco Veracini playing the violin better than him, and he was fuming and also dissatisfied with his own skills. The event made him spiral into depression for months, and in that time he worked in solitude and practiced the violin for 12 hours a day. During this period, it's said he had a dream in which the devil appeared and he met him. He appeared at the foot of his bed and played a sonata on the violin like he invented the damn activity. He offered him success in all his musical dreams in exchange for his soul. Did he accept? Well, it was never really confirmed, but when he woke up the next day he wrote down as much of the sonata as he could, but no matter how many times he played it, it just wasn't as good as the Devil's version. If you want to check it out, the sonata in question is called the Devil's Trill Sonata, his most well-known piece, and it's quite hard to play even by today's standards. But the fact he could never play it as well as the Devil, I mean, doesn't that just indicate he wasn't successful in everything he wanted to be? So am I the only one identifying this major plot hole we have going on? Did he accept? Did he not? Let me know, Tartini. Filling our number 3 slot is Gemma Galgani. Gemma was an Italian mystic, later saint, in Italy during the late 19th century. She believed that the devil was waging a personal war against her. She said he loved giving her horrible headaches to the point she couldn't even pray. I mean, honestly, I just feel like that was a bad migraine, but moving on. She went on to say that once she was writing at her desk alone and the devil came and dragged her from the table by her hair with such force that her hair came out in clumps. In another attack, the devil took the form of a big black dog and put his paws on her shoulders, making her whole body ache all over. And in another one, she was drinking holy water and he twisted her arms so backwards that she fell to the ground in pain. If that's not bad enough, she said he even took on the form of people she trusted or knew, and once he even took the form of an angel. The worst incident though was when he started giving her blows to the head. She ran to her room but found him there with a rope. He kept trying to get her to give in to the wickedness and she kept resisting, and so he kept striking her with the rope as she was on the ground. He then threw her on the bed, then dragged her from it and violently smashed her head against the ground, and she passed out. Just imagine all this happening in your room and no one's there to help you. I'd be terrified. But I'm also curious as to what form the devil took when he attacked her all those times, and if anybody was around, were they seeing this happen? Was she being attacked by an invisible force? Like, what was happening here? Now at number 2 is Steve. This one's from Redditor Shabby Boa, whose real name is Steve and who used to be a trucker for 30 years. One night after a drop-off, he was on his way back home when he stopped at a diner to pee. It was completely empty, no customers, no staff, absolutely no one. He quickly peed, and when he came out, a grey-haired man was sitting at the bar. He told Steve he owned the diner and gave him food and a drink. When he got up to leave, the man said food is not what you truly desired tonight. Weirded out, Steve left and got into his truck. About an hour and a half later, he had to pee again. Steve, you've got a small bladder, mate, and saw another small diner which he stopped at. He went inside and again it was completely empty save a grey-haired man at the bar. It was the same man who said nice to have you back, Steve, as soon as he walked in. Steve got pissed at this point, thinking he was being screwed over by this guy, and demanded to know what the guy wanted. He said he was trying to help Steve. He started asking about Steve and how he used to have a family. Steve told him his wife and daughter died in a house fire years ago caused by faulty wiring. But the man questioned him, saying it wasn't just faulty wiring. The faulty wiring was a happy coincidence that just so happened to have happened the same time Steve left a lit cigarette in the house. Steve fought with him more, and in the end the man offered him a deal. He said he could bring back his wife and daughter in exchange for his soul after he died. Thinking it was complete bullshit, He agreed and left the diner. Before he did, he asked the man who he was, to which he responded, "I am the devil." That night he got home as if he never stopped anywhere at all, and when he entered the house, he heard his wife say, "Steve, is that you?" and the small footsteps of his daughter. He was so excited, but when they came down the stairs, their skin was charred black. Chunks of it were falling off, their clothes had fused and melted with their skin, and Steve could barely hold in his puke. And at that point he'd realized he'd made the biggest mistake ever, and that the next 30 years were literally gonna be hell. And finally, at number 1 is The Man. This one's from VR Greg, who said she met the devil for the first time when she was 8 years old. She was walking through a forest on her way home from school when she encountered a black-haired man in a shabby suit. Except one foot of his was a goat hoof and the other was a rooster claw. She could see them when she looked at him directly, but peripherally they looked completely normal. She took him for a walk and then he left. By the time she was a teenager, she assumed the counter was maybe a dream, or maybe that she just imagined the whole thing. But one day she was watching a news story about a man who got away with killing his wife, and as they showed the judge announcing the not guilty verdict, the murderer turned around and smiled at a man behind him who wasn't his lawyer. She recognized him right away. Black hair, shabby suit, hadn't aged a day. Her parents threw her a surprise 16th birthday to which nobody came to, which is just really sad. I'm sorry that happened to you. She ran home crying, and she knew no one came because her classmate Erin had her party the same day just to spite her. That night she slept thinking about all the horrible ways Erin deserved to be punished, and the next day at the breakfast table her dad looked shaken. He told her that Erin had been found dead in the park. She met the devil the same day in her room, and he told her she had wanted it to happen and he executed it for her. He offered her a deal, but thankfully the one piece of common sense that 90% of people possess is knowing that you should never make a deal with the devil, so she didn't. The girl didn't see him again until the funeral of her mother, where he told her the doctors lied to her about her mother dying peacefully, that it was agony and that no one was around to help her. She started immediately screaming, and her dad ran over to her and made her sit down. When she asked him where the black-haired man was, he said, "You were standing alone, honey," and just started screaming out of nowhere. Shivers. That gave me shivers.